Hello and welcome to the Oddschecker preview podcast ahead of the Friday and Saturday of the Goodwood Festival. I'm joined by Andy Holding, Oddschecker's very own horse racing tipster, and professional punter Mike Spence as well. I'm your host, George Elek. This is being recorded on Monday afternoon, just after midday. So we're not entirely sure of all the runners on the Friday, but we're going to run through the four races that are currently priced up. The Stewards Cup is also priced up on the Saturday, and I'll open the floor for any other runners to keep an eye out for Saturday. So please do forgive us if we mention any horses that are out by the time you're listening to this on Thursday or Friday. But hopefully we can come up with some good and interesting angles for you either way. On to the first race on Friday, and it's the Oak Tree Stakes, where we have Jubiloso as the 7-4 favourite. Royal Intervention 13-2, Angels Hideaway 8-1, Tapisserie 10-1, 11-1 Bar. Andy, I'll come to you first, and let's talk about the favourite and any other horses you think could lay down a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic class dropper, isn't it? Here, Jubiloso ran in a Group 1 last time at the Coronation Stakes. We all know how good that form is in comparison to what most of these have been running against. She's only had the 3 runs, very impressive the time before it moved, and she scampered away from a good field. It was also impressive on debut at Chelmsford, when she looked as though her legs were going 2 to everyone's 1. The mile on the soft ground was a bridge too far for her on the day, but she ran perfectly respectably, which justified her entry and her running the race. Look, it's pretty obvious she's going to be a short one here. Ryan Moore's already been booked. Looks like she's definitely going to run. So have a look at perhaps 1 or 2 others that you might also turn up and could offer a bit of value further down the line. There's a nice horse in this that Martin Mead trains called Lisbeth. She's only had the 2 runs. She was 5th on debut last year as a 2-year-old. Brought along nice and patiently, but was off the track for 300 odd days. Then went to Doncaster the other day. She was sent off 9-1 amazingly in a small field. But she beat 2 fairly useful horses, and they've both won since. Lady Lawyer of John Gosden's, who made the run in that day, was a sitting duck from Lisbeth. Won at Chelmsford in quite a good race in the night, which drifted amazingly in the betting, considering I thought she got the best form. And Posted from the Richard Hammond stable.
Won a couple of days ago as well.
Quite rightly was didn't get missed in the commentary because I think it was Simon Holzer delivered the goods at Salisbury on Saturday. So the 2 horses behind Lisbeth, albeit only probably 80-90 rated horse, at least give that time figure, which was very good, some substance. She seemed to be very strong at the finish, and I'm pretty sure that Martin Mead had a similar type to this Lisbeth a couple of years ago, which improved through the ranks. I can't remember his name. I think it won a listed group race at Sandown, and like I say, went on improving. I can't remember the name of her, but she reminded me of that filly. So even though she's only probably officially rated probably an 80 or 90 rated horse, it wouldn't surprise me if she ran way above her station, and I see some firms have gone 25-1 about her.
Yeah, currently 25-1 is the best price.
I'd risk a few quid on her because, like I say, she's already jocked up, and the horses that she's beat have already franked her form. She's not one to dismiss lightly. Yeah, that
25-1 is with Coral at the moment. Yeah, Mike, next up. So how are you looking at this one?
It's quite hard from an anti-post point of view. It's quite hard. There's 30 entries, Maxfield of 20. She's exceptionally short at this stage. This is Jubiloso, sorry. It's exceptionally short at this stage, considering how many might be running and where she might get drawn. 7 furlongs, is, as I've said on every podcast so far, it's the sort of biggest of the draw biases here. And if she was to be drawn 19 or 20, I mean, she'll be 5-2 on the day. That's obviously the risk you're taking. I can't see her being much shorter, even if she was to get drawn 4 or 3, like the plum draw. She's not going to go off on, if there's 16, 17 runners, she's not going to go off odds on anyway. So I don't think there's any value in backing her now. It just looks like the type of race that even if it was to cut up a lot and half declared, you're still getting 15 runners. I wouldn't have a negative word to say about Lisbeth. Would she? I'd be surprised if she was good enough, but then again, she's 25-1, and so, that's very much priced in accordingly, and if I'm certainly not going to put anyone off backing one at 25-1. all priced in. I thought Beauty Filly was probably the one if I was going to have a bet each way. I think Jubiloso should say I think she takes a lot of beating if everything goes right, but that price isn't very appealing at all. We're looking at it now. We've got Too Darn Hot 5-4, and she's 13-8. I mean, there's only one horse I'm backing at those prices right now. Beauty Filly won a listed race last time at Chester. She looks better than ever this year. Goodwood winner in June as well, and she won a good handicap very easily off 89, beating a horse of Roger Varian's called Moo Pitch, who'd won before that at Yarmouth and then came out and won again very easily at Newcastle. Her form was very good, and it wasn't surprised she went off joint favourite for that listed race at Chester. She's got a bit to find, but she's improving, and I think she's about 9-1.
14-1.
14-1.
365.
Again, she's not a confirmed runner, and I think she might just want a touch of soft ground, so you probably wouldn't be wanting to steam in right now, but on the day, I think she's probably, if she was to run, I'd be backing her as the... Well, I'm not sure whether I'd have a bet, but if I was putting one up each way, it would be her each way, I think. I think she's just a bit overpriced.
The Beauty Filly 14-1, Elizabeth 25-1, and currently Jubiloso 7-4, but maybe one to steer clear of at the price at the moment. If you agree with Mike, that it just seems a bit skinny with a lot of unknowns still to come in terms of who's going to be running and what the draw will be. On now to the Bonhams Thoroughbred Stakes. Never Know More 4-1 across the board favourite. Duke of Hazard 6-1, Turgenev 8-1, Momkin 9-1, Art Duval 9-1, Happy Power 9-1. King Ottschecker is 10-1, although 5-1 in places. So it could be one where for Charlie Fellows, if he were to run, would shorten up markedly. But that's the case with most of these because these races will cut up, of course. So we're trying to find the ones that will run and could provide a bit of value. So Andy, looking for you to show us the way.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's going to be great value or not, but I was really taken by Duke of Hazard's win the other day at Newmarket. The time figure was sensational. There was a real good gallop. Frankie served it up on Turgenev, who was called second in the handicap at Royal Ascot, the Britannia. All the right horses were involved. Momkin, who had run well in the Jersey. There was an improving horse of Richard Hammond in there, Motafarwit. Even Urban Icon had run quite well in the Jersey as well. And this horse, all of a sudden, he just took off inside the last furlong. And he went 3 lengths clear. His sectionals were good. I think I remember he did 34 dead from 3 out, and it was the best sectional on that card. He obviously improved for the blinkers. Now obviously they've got to work again. We all know that. Old Maxim. But his run before was a good one, showing he's going in the right direction. And Paul Cole's had a much better season this year. He's just nibbled away at the odd little nugget here, there, everywhere. He looks as though he's got the odd nice horse in his care. Providing he turns up in the same form, I think he'd be very difficult to beat. He's won at the track as well, which is another point worth making. So, like I say, I don't know what price he used.
6-1 at the moment.
Yeah, 6-1. That's not a bad shout in a what looks a fairly wide open contest, as far as I can see.
Mike?
I put Duke of Hazard up in the Britannia on this podcast in the Royal Ascot, and they didn't run it, but it was 50-1.
What were they thinking?
What were they thinking? I think it's a tricky race there, so I think he sets a fair standard. It's a trappy old race. This Never Know More is the interesting one. He's favourite at the moment. Clearly had a problem when he was a non-runner in the French Guineas and hasn't been seen since. He is the type of horse that could go off a pretty short price favourite here, I think. It just wouldn't surprise me if he were to get very, very well backed, which you would want to see. You'd want to see him a very strong price favourite if you were going to back him.
Often happens with those connections, doesn't it?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes some money floods in over the Irish Sea. And, if that was to come, I think he'd be worth
hopping
really
on board.
Keeping an eye on. Maybe you're taking a bit of a leap of faith, but at the same time, where the money comes like it did for 10 Sovereigns in the July Cup, it's not often they leave it behind, and this is the type of horse.
Another horse you tipped up for the Royal Ascot.
Another one. That, God knows what happens.
Did run
that though. But yeah, this is the type of horse which they like to have a bet on, where something has happened and nobody knows what it is apart from them. And I suspect if the money comes in a big way, they might not leave it behind here.
To Never Know More, currently 4-1, but suggestions that maybe if you see that price start to tumble, it's probably worth keeping an eye on. We'll move on now to the Golden Mile, where we've got Mojito at 9-2. And then double figure prices, the rest: Escobar 10-1, Afak 12-1 alongside Cloncooley, Flaming Spear 14-1, History Writer 14-1. A few of these entered in races earlier on in the week, so again, we're not entirely sure who's going to run where. But Mike, we can start with a favourite, I suppose. Worth talking about Mojito a bit, and any others that you're interested in.
Yeah, Mojito, I think he sets a good standard. He's probably not going to shorten up before the race. He was given an absolute peach of a ride by Frankie at Sandown. Absolutely perfect. Couldn't have gone any slower. Everything else decided to let Frankie have his own way, and he took full advantage. £3 penalty, I mean, it puts him in a very good position. He's a very talented horse. This race will cut up a bit. There's a lot, as George kindly said, running earlier in the week, quite a lot of them. And there's one called Power of Darkness, who's down at the bottom, who was disappointing at Newmarket earlier in the year, but was given a break and produced a phenomenal sectional at Salisbury to win a good handicap there in very good style. The only worry is, for me, I have a slight feeling Connections feel they're not going to get into this race, and I think they will. But obviously, if he's balloted out, you get your money back. But I think he's about 12-1 at the moment. Power of Darkness.
Keep going. 16-1.
16. So, I
Mike,
mean,
you need to start using Oddschecker.
I need to start using Oddschecker. I just think this horse, if it was quicker ground, which it should be on the Friday, and they go a fast pace, he's going to fly late, and he's definitely better than 94. And I do really, when you get these sort of handicaps where they're high class, nothing's really got much in hand, and I don't think anything above has an awful lot in hand. And as long as he were to get a reasonable draw, I wouldn't want a low draw here, because he's likely to be held up, and I can see him getting stuck in all sorts of trouble. I'd quite like a draw of about 10-11, where he's able to get cover, but still the gaps will open. And I think he has the potential to really throw it down to Mojito.
So 16-1 Power of Darkness for Mike. Andy, what's catching your eye at this early stage?
Yeah, there's only really one horse that I've had my eye on in this race for quite a while. I haven't actually backed it yet and put it up as an anti-post bet, because the draw is such an advantage here at Goodwood. It'd be foolish for me to go gung-ho on too many points and find that we're drawn out in the car park. But providing Escobar gets well drawn, he must have a serious chance of going close. He was sent off 4-1 favourite for this race last year. He was drawn in stall 2, all the stars aligned, and he got an absolutely horrific run through. He got no luck in running. When everything came dive bombing over the outside, Seniority and Cake Barron and such as the like, he got trapped in on the inside, couldn't get out for love nor money, and ended up finishing on the bridle, really. I think he finished 6th or 7th. His race, or his season's been very much geared around this race again, 12 months on. He ran behind Mojito at Sandown, got beat a length and a half, but unfortunately the blindfold didn't get taken off on time, and he ended up dropping out the stalls, losing valuable ground, gave away probably 4 or 5 lengths, made most of it up, but in the end, as Mike pointed out, it was a well-judged ride from Frankie from the front, so he had a lot of difficulty closing down a 108 rated horse who was obviously, got plenty of energy left. But he beat the rest fair and square, and then he toyed with a very good horse the other day at York, a horse called Rise Hall, who we all saw won very easily at Newmarket the other day when he was giving his head. But he made him look silly the other day. He came there cruising, literally just like laughed at him. Thank you very much. He's that kind of horse, Escobar. He's obviously a bit of a bridle horse that has to have things right, but if he does get a good draw, ability-wise, there's not that many that can match him in a race like this, if he does get a clear run. And he's 10-1 top price. I could see him again going very close to being sort of 4-5-1 the odds he was last year. If he gets a good posse, he's got a huge amount of talent, and he's with the right man as well. David Amor is deadly in these kind of handicaps when he takes them down south.
He's another one, though. You wouldn't want to be drawn too high or too low.
Well, he is hostage to fortune wherever he's drawn. If he's drawn 20, he's got to be dropped in. If he's drawn 1, he's got to be dropped in. He's going to have horses in front of him. It's just whether he gets the breaks. Yeah. But if he does get the breaks, then, like I said, there's not that many horses that can match him.
Escobar 10-1 with Bet365. We move now on to the King George, which doesn't look like a particularly good betting heat to me, but I'll let you guys tell me I'm wrong. with Batash at 4-11 after the Ascot defeat to Blue Point. I've told you when you've both been wrong on the Royal Ascot podcast, so I may as well point out that I brazenly claimed that there was no point talking about Blue Point for the Diamond Jubilee because he wouldn't run, and he would run and won, so that was good. Sorry about that. El Astronaut 7-1, Sergei Prokofiev 14-1, Big Brother's Pride 16-1, Judicial 20-1, 25-1 Bar. I mean, obviously we saw Batash beaten at Ascot, of course, where he has little form, so maybe not a massive surprise. And I mean, would either of you two be looking to take him on at the prices we're currently seeing for this?
No.
Similar.
Yeah.
There's not a lot you could say here. We could pad it out and make it sound as though there's a whole host of horses that could beat him. The only thing that really could beat him is Batash himself. He's done it before, but here at Goodwood, he's just a simply different animal. And at your flat tracks or tracks where it's more emphasis on speed rather than stamina, that last furlong and a half at Ascot uphill, particularly on soft grounds, it turned out the King Standards did for him. And Blue Point, who stays 6 furlongs well, just outstayed him basically. But he lost nothing in defeat, let's face it. He only got beat, a length and a bit by a very, very good horse who's now retired. But he's the best around under these conditions. I presume that come Friday, the ground will be perfectly okay. You need to monitor that, obviously, if you're taking a short price. But, the likes of Copper Knight, El Astronaut are probably, at absolute best, really good 105 to 110 horses in listed race stroke, very good handicaps. That wouldn't necessarily be good enough to beat Batash, of course, who's a genuine 120-odd horse. Probably one of the best around in the world under his conditions. Sergei Prokofiev has been a bit of a disappointment this season for one thing or another. Maybe really better ground, slightly quicker ground might be okay for him. But yeah, it's a race that should be Batash's on all-known form.
Anything to add?
No, I almost think he's as long as he goes down to the start, okay, I think I'd probably back him at 4-11.
The currently mythical, without Batash market, anyone you'd be looking to...
Well, El Astronaut's the obvious one.
Yeah.
It is no prizes for originality, but he comes in great form. He's, of course, a distance winner, and I think John Quinn's just saying, well, we'll roll the dice with him, because he just keeps picking up prize money after prize money after prize money. They took him to Ireland, they plundered a couple of nice pots at Cork and then at the Curragh. It was nothing wrong with it. He's a run the other day, and he's just an all-out 5 furlong speedball. So he's also suited to the track as his form suggested. So good luck to the Quins. There's bound to be some big money floating around for second. It's 67 grand for second, 33 grand for third.
Yeah.
It's a good day's work if he chases home Batash.
There you go. So Batash 4-11, possibly a bet, and El Astronaut the likely one to follow up behind. The next 3 races of the day aren't currently priced up as with the other days. Any of the horses there that you guys are looking at, just want to flag up before we move on to Saturday?
Not as yet, I must admit. Communique looks as though he got an obvious chance in the Queen's Plate Glorious Stakes, the Group 3. He comes in obviously good shape, having won and bounced back to form at Newmarket last time out. Anything that Johnson runs has got to be a massive consideration. And a lot depends on the weather and what runs early on in the week with that 5:15 for the 3-year-old stayers. I've been quite impressed with the horse called Ironclad in his last 2 runs. And Hugo Primer's horses finally have come out the doldrums. I like the way he got the job done last time. He'd be an interesting runner. But they're just names to conjure with at this early stage.
Fair enough. On to Saturday, unless there's anything, Mike, you've got for us.
I think Frankie Dettori on Be Prepared in the nursery will run very well. He bumped into a very good horse last time at Epsom. 3 of them finished the race, but it was a very good 3-runner race.
So Simon Crisford there, Be Prepared. I love how coy you are with these. It's just so mysterious. But yeah, Be Prepared runs on the 4:10 at the moment for Simon Crisford. So one to keep an eye on there. On to the Saturday, where the only race that's priced up at the moment is the Stewards Cup. Just Another Bottle is a 10-1 favourite. In Spanish City, Flavius Titus, 14-1. Staxton's Kadim, Gunmetal, Gulliver, and Blazoned all 16-1. It's an absolute minefield as it is at the moment in terms of so many factors. But just as we can see the current entries, if there's any case that you guys can make for any of them at this early stage.
I know what Mike will go for.
What's that?
You'll mention Summergand.
So no, it needs an uphill finish.
Yeah.
Needs an uphill finish. There we go.
He was a bit disappointing at Ascot. I thought he was really going to run well. He was backed all the way into 12-1 that day, but I thought it was just a bit.
You think so? It was a fair run. He got beat 3 lengths by Kate Byron.
Which didn't really sort of ran out. I came there. I thought he was going to win 2 out, and then he just didn't really go anywhere for a furlong, and then stayed on. But no, so I think Late Volta will run quite well in this. He could surprise. He's been sort of flipping between 6 and 7 if they were to run him, that is. Which no, Mark Johnson, they probably will, but he's only off 100, and he's been running against some good horses recently. I think he'll run well. It's an easier track to sort of dominate than when he ran in the Wokingham. And I'm sure he'll run a solid race.
Well, 33-1 currently for Late Volta. Andy?
Well, I thought the Stewards Cup this year was a very good one, hence the fact I went for Kate Byron rather foolishly in the end in the July Cup. That didn't quite work out. But his time figure was very good, and I made a note of the form and the horses that have subsequently run out of the Wokingham, and they've all flagged it up. So anything that caught my eye ran well against the bias, such as Summergand and more predominantly Gunmetal, I would have a good look at. Now Gunmetal ran in last year's Stewards Cup. He never really figured. He was probably drawn on the wrong side of the track where the winner came from. Was it Gifted Master won it last year?
Yeah.
I think it was Gifted Master, which was a bit of an odd result in many respects. But I like the way that Gunmetal went through the line at Ascot. Again, he was just slightly drawn on the wrong side where the main action was. You needed to be sort of like down the tip of the arrow and getting a run down the favoured side part of the track. And he was drawn on the low side. He came out by a long way the best of those that were drawn low. I think he was drawn 6. The winner was drawn 10, 13, 17, 12, 15. Perfection, who's run well since, 23. Late Volta 16. But you look at how the forms worked out. Tis Marvellous has won. Danzino's won. Summergand hasn't run since. Raucous, I think he's run well since. Perfection finished second next time out. Late Volta ran well next time out over the July course. I mean, it's just a sensational piece of form, other than the winner, Kate Byron. So I think I definitely want to be with that form line, and Gunmetal, like I say, ran the best of those that were drawn low. David Barron's handicappers don't need any second introduction. He's a genius with that kind of horse.
So
what price is he?
16-1 at the moment, Gunmetal. Summergand is 25-1.
Yeah, probably those two. I'd fiddle around with those two out of the Stewards Cup form. The Wokingham form, sorry.
Perfect. Any more to add in that race? Or
no, that'll do. I think keep it simple.
Finally, the last race. I mean, no prices at the moment. I think they came out and they've gone again. But we'll quickly talk about the Lily Langtry, where we have currently 17 entered for the moment. Any of those currently in worth keeping an eye on when the prices do come out?
I've been very keen on Enbahar myself throughout this year. Backed her on all 3 starts this year, and she just looks very solid filly to me. She was very impressive at Goodwood on her first start this year. She ran at York and I think she was just in front a long time that day. Hung across the track and kind of gave it away in the end. She got beat by Dramatic Queen, but I wasn't surprised to see her overturn the form with Dramatic Queen last time. And I thought she did that well against the pace bias, which was a slow pace. And in what doesn't look the best of races, she's a big old filly who will only be getting better as time goes on, and she will run pretty well despite having to give away a bit of weight.
So Enbahar therefore for Lily Langtry.
I do like Enbahar as well. I was very impressed with it at Haydock. I fancied one in that race. I think it was Classique, one of William Haggis's. And I thought she was going to win all the way through that race. She's travelled really nicely. She was well backed. 2 out, I thought, I should pick these up now. And Enbahar and Dramatic Queen just went into another parish. The two of them just went further and further clear. Naileti was well beat. Looked a strong group too, that did. Very strong. And I think John Gosden holds the key to this race, because if he does run her, then I think she'll be very close to being favoured. If she doesn't run, There's an interesting 3-year-old that might just take a place. John's obviously got an embarrassment of riches with his fillies, but particularly his 3-year-old fillies. Of course, he's got Medaya, Starcatcher, who won the Ribblesdale, and of course won well the other day over in Ireland. He runs a couple, or he potentially could run a couple that have only been winning maiden stroke novice events. Litigious, who won the other day, is one of them, but I can't see that running. But he runs a horse potentially could run a horse called Promissory, who's a massive eye catcher first time out, behind again one of his other stable representatives, also called Terrabellum, who got stuck in the mud at Newbury next time out. Went to Doncaster the other day for a little tootle round there, won, pulling handsprings. But the fact that made its debut here at Goodwood and has then been brought on quite gradually. If he decides that she's ready for a race like this, the fact that he's just entered her tells you what you need to know. She could be worth a look at a big price. But it's probably doubtful that he will run her, but you never know.
So a couple there for John Gosden in the Lily Langtry, and that brings us to a close in our Goodwood previews. We've recorded one episode, which you can find on YouTube or any podcast app. One episode for Tuesdays racing, one for Wednesdays, one for Thursdays. This combined Fridays and Saturdays. We hope you've enjoyed them. Hopefully, just as with the Royal Ascot ones, we've given you some winners. Thank you very much to Mike and Andy. And make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can find all of our future content on there. And hopefully you enjoy the week's racing.